are live. All right. We are Hellfire Agency and Myth Vision. I just got started out. I want to say I'm not calling him Sky Daddy. Ever. Not even if there's a fire.
Not even in a fire. So the thumbnail, we gotta briefly mention what the thumbnail's all about. My audience won't know. You and I connected on Step Brothers. If you haven't watched Will Ferrell and like the hilarious movie Step Brothers, we probably watched that dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So
this is how we related to each other faster than anything else. When I sent it to him, when I sent to you back in 2024, when I started the Church of Korihor, I sent you this idea of you and I just sitting there wearing sweater vests and like posing Step Brothers, like the poster, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. And then we started just throwing out memes at each other. And it was so funny because I'm like, it was just like the movie. Because there was this moment where I'm like, did we just become best friends? And you're like, yep.
Yep.
Do you want to do karate in the garage?
Yep. There's so much there. Even I still use those sayings every once in a while. They randomly come up. Like my brother the other day, we're playing Call of Duty. And he said something like Pan or Pam, and I'm not sure what he says. Did you say Pam? 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 And he's like, it's Pam.
It's Pam.
Yeah, and he's just... So it only worked for people who've watched the movie.
Right. And you'll get our humor. But the one that really got to me, I used an AI software for all of my stuff, and I fed it a picture of Korihor. I am Joe Rollins. I'm the first herald of the Church of Korihor, which is a spiritual community for atheists and agnostics. And we use this meme basically of a man that is Korihor, and who's what we're going to talk about today. I fed it into. I thought it would be so funny if we fed into this AI software my picture and yours and Korihor's like we were three stepbrothers. And I fed it at one of your pictures where you're showing these manly arms that you've got going on and these great tattoos. And you got to see this one. Come on, here, let me get rid of this one. Remove.
Oh my gosh. Look, he's got my tattoos.
I gave him your tattoos.
He's got my tattoos. Like, what's happening here, bro?
It was so funny because it still kept his skin tone and everything, but it's just like these tattoos are too butch, too manly for you, Lambert. We're giving these to Korihor.
Korihor. So someone might go, who's Korihor? And I think we've done this before, but I guarantee you most of my audience hasn't watched our discussion. Who is Korihor, Joe? Why Korihor? What's the big deal about this guy's name?
I love telling the story of Korihor, and as the first herald of the Church of Korihor, I get to do it all the time. And also, I wrote a book when I left Mormonism. I was a Mormon missionary in 2001, and I was in the Peruvian Amazon, depressed as hell, and realizing as I looked around me, similar moments to what you have had, you described, we've talked about with your sobriety and everything coming out of this, that I can't rely on God anymore. And it was around that time that I said, you know what? Here's the thing, is that in the Book of Mormon, there's this character named Korihor, who is not strictly an atheist. He is an agnostic atheist in his arguments. And he makes the best case, the most simple but true case for why not only does he not believe that God exists, but he makes a case for why it seems like the church in his community in the Book of Mormon, the Nephites, the Christian church, who are pre-Christ Christians, right? That they are wicked and cruel, and he can see through their motivations and see that they are only trying to glut themselves on the labor of the people, and they want to exert control and power and coercion over people. And it's so crazy to me. It was at that time that I thought to myself, it's wild to think that there is, whether or not this story is true, which I don't buy that the story is true,
Right.
that it came from the brain of Joseph Smith, and everything that he has to say, his skepticism about Christianity writ large, is now really true about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So you're saying inside, the way I'm trying to understand what you're saying is that inside the Book of Mormon, this story about Korihor, that it was invented by Joseph Smith as a way to rebut this, let's say, stand-in fictional character, which may actually have hints at Thomas Paine and who's the other guy, Ethan Allen and others who seem to be in popular minds that were critical of Christianity, critical of Jesus, all that, have actually factually come to be true, the actual case about Mormonism. And they left this in their text. Like, it's like, do you not realize that this is self-defeating in a way?
Right. Yeah, and it's kind of become a cross for them to bear in a real way. No, but I love that, the way you said that. Yeah. So it's certainly a fictional story, right? The story of Lehi and his family coming over 600 years BCE, escaping Jerusalem. There's so many historical anachronisms in the Book of Mormon as to make it, there are big movements outside of the LDS Church in Mormonism that have already abandoned the historicity of the Book of Mormon. Like, people are ready to just walk away from it. And frankly, a lot of Mormons are already abandoning it. Just can't say it. But the church defends it still, and that's why it's ironic, because at the end of the day, I think when I published the Korihor argument in 2013, right after I was officially excommunicated by the Mormon Church, I put in there a line that's I still go back to again and again, which is Korihor represents the biggest secret for Mormonism and Christianity, really. And that is that it represents Joseph Smith's most closely guarded doubts about whether or not God exists. And because in the end, what happens is this: Korihor goes around telling people his legit claims about why his epistemology on his perspective of the world, and it's very basic stuff anybody who has deconstructed religion knows. Things like empiricism, makes an appeal to empiricism. He makes an appeal to Lockean tabula rasa. He says that one of the best lines that Korihor teaches people is, he says, what in one of his debates, he has 3 debates. One of them, Ammon just totally forfeits. He doesn't even answer him a word. Gedona is this laughable character who says to him, who like hears his arguments and says, okay, basically, I understand why you doubt that there is a God and why you doubt that there will be a Christ. But at the same time, consider how many people's hopes hang on this. So why you got to rain on everybody's parade? And Korihor lays it out for him. And he's like, it's immoral. You are taking advantage of these people. You are glutting yourselves on the fruits of their labors. And you do it to exert control over them. And that's wrong. And you love to preach to us about how bad we are and how immoral we are, because we don't live by the effect of a frenzied mind, he calls it, and by the foolish traditions of your fathers. And he's making the solid case. You got to think, this is Joseph Smith looking into his hat with a rock and going, and with a hat that's well documented to be deep enough that you could easily put anything in the bottom of that hat and be looking at that and be like, oh, I'm looking at this rock, supposedly because he's got this rock that's got like this godly Bluetooth that connects him to the gold plates that are buried out in the yard somewhere, so that nobody runs the risk of being killed from the holy light coming off of them. And so, and it's like, and then he's going to sit there thinking, okay, before lunch, we're going to come up with all the reasons why it's totally legit to question whether or not God exists. But in this character, I'm going to show that no, it's totally rational to believe in God. And by the end of the story, it's so clear he has lost the point. He has lost it. You know how sometimes you'll like sit down and you'll say, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do this, and it's going to go like this. And he's like, and
he's narrating what ends up in the Book of Mormon is your point, and that he thinks he's going to win this debate against a fictional guy he's made up that is kind of a reflection of his own doubts. But he ultimately, the way he loses, because how's he have to? He has to take this character out of his story. How's he do it? He has these people trample him. I mean, he gets completely murdered.
That's right.
You can't win against him. You can't argue against him and like win a debate, and then somehow you have the character run away like you do with Socrates, who's arguing against the sophist and stuff, and they finally get so frustrated with this questioning they have to dip. He can't even debate against the own guy he invents in his own head. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, there's a whole psychology game to be played here. I think I've always said in that, Korihor represents his doubts. So what does he do? He strips him of his voice. Basically, in the debate with Alma, which is the third debate, the one where they really get into it, he lays out pretty clearly all of the same points that he laid out with the first two guys. So I'm like, okay, he meant for this debate to happen with Ammon, but then figured out while he's sitting there reading in his hat, I don't know what I'm going to say. Hold on. And so he creates the story where he gets kicked up to Gedona from Ammon, and Gedona makes part of the case. And then he's like, I need a little more time. And then he kicks him up to Alma. And it's like he keeps trying to prolong the story so he can get to the part where he makes the case on how Joseph Smith, the believer of God, defeats Joseph Smith, skeptic about God. And the case on how that comes to be, I think, is interesting. How it historically, how we think that actually happened. And Dan Vogel, who we've talked about briefly, makes a good case for this. Pretty much every ex-Mormon critic that I know agrees with it. And I'll talk about that. But in the end of the day, the proof, the debate is about, it's not rational or reasonable to believe in God without proof that God has power. That's the thing that Korihor keeps coming back. Show unto me a sign. And when they say, a fool looks for a sign, or, it's a sinner who seeks a sign. And he's like, groovy, fine. Here's the thing. We're never going to believe until you show some kind of empirical proof.
Right.
And he says, and the reason why you have to show us something is because you have convinced us that this is a fallen people because of the sins of a parent, which is very, if you know Christianity, and who knows it better than you, Derek, this is very,
still, I mean,
okay. But you're in there.
Yeah.
And he says, if you can't, if we are responsible for the sins of a parent, he says, this is the thing. A child is not guilty because of its parents. And I'm sitting here looking at this going, this is kind of if not a masterclass, at least a primer into all the internal problems with Christianity right there. And it's at that moment that Alma decides, I'll tell you, okay, I will give you this for a sign. You will not be able to speak from this moment forward. And he takes away his voice. And that is the worst thing he could have done, in my opinion. Because not only he follows that up with Korihor, then unable to speak, and this is his living, right? This is how he makes his bread. He pleads with him by writing to him and saying, please return to me the use of my voice. I admit everything. An angel appeared to me, disguised as an angel of light, but he was really the devil. I now see that it was the devil, and that it was, and he taught me everything I should say, which should make sense. Which makes sense in Joseph Smith's brain, I'm sure. But that's the point where even as a Mormon, I'm looking at him like, so the atheist believes in atheism because an angel appeared to him and sold him on atheism.
Yeah, it's assuming you and I and everyone who's an atheist, technically, based on this character Korihor, who represents everyone who's a skeptic of Christianity. We're all approached by demonic forces. We made a treaty with them. We agree to them. In a sense, we allow them also to dupe us. We believe their own lie. And yet now we're like blind to the reality of we're just saying what the demon or the devil that approached us and made a contract with us made us do. And then now he's now being shown, okay. Now I know it was a demon. That definitely a believer would make up that story. Okay. With no doubt, a Christian would absolutely, any form of Christian would definitely. How often do we go, no, you really do believe in God? They always say, no, you really know that there's a God. And it's like, we're trying to tell you, we really don't know that. We really are doubting this. Like, we really do not have what you think we have. You're projecting here. Like, you assume because you've had experiences that you know this God. I've had experiences. I now look at them through a more rational lens and natural lens. And there's this like demonic kind of perception that they're painting. I think that's an interesting angle to consider. Joseph Smith's way of dealing with the atheist is not to win against them in argumentation. It's take their voice away and then like have this like, I want to use an analogy to say there are scholars, for example, that look at John the Baptist in the New Testament, right? As more like a character. Now, this is not the mainstream position, but there are scholars, like I've had Robert Price and others who've thought that, and he's quoting other scholars too, who think that John the Baptist was inserted into the narrative in order to convince John the Baptist followers, the Mandeans and those who were following him that were not Christians. They didn't follow Jesus. They followed John. But what's the best way to get the John followers to join Christianity? So you have their guy in the story that says, look, I'm not even worthy to unloosen this guy's sandal. Like he is the man. This guy's the man.
Right.
So now
I have need to be baptized of thee, and comest thou to me? Right.
There you are with that damn Book of Mormon English. You know what I'm saying? But I tell you, I was trying to read this story before we did the live, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I do not miss this kind of like rhetoric, the way that it's written, the whole, so it's just harder to wrap your head around, but it feels like not the same necessarily. Korihor might be a stand-in for the rationalist, for the post-enlightenment skeptic who isn't buying the story the same way John the Baptist, but John the Baptist was really representing a movement of people who followed him, and the Christians are absorbing the John followers into their cult by having their guy salute their guy, right? That John is saluting Jesus. That means you John followers, you Mandeans, need to get with the program and realize even John recognized our Jesus. So I feel like Korihor is playing the same role, and it also is kind of warning you, Mr. Skeptic, Mr. Doubter, believe anyways, because if you don't, Korihor had a nasty end, and so did other people who didn't follow the truth. It's the way he deals with his protagonist, I guess you'd say.
Right, and that's exactly it. Is that there's an archetype in Scripture of the doubter who has to be called out. And we see it, in like that line in the New Testament about, almost thou dost convert me to be a Christian. We see it in Satan tempting Jesus in the desert, and he's like, all of this will I give unto thee. It's always setting up the bad guy to be the skeptic and trying to defeat him. But the case that's made is never made so compacted for me as Korihor into a character that has a motive, including that the motive, according to Joseph Smith, it's ironic, maybe not ironic, maybe telling that his name is Korihor. This is not the first time in the Book of Mormon or last where Joseph Smith makes a character he doesn't like whose name ends in whore. And it's like everything. This is all Joseph Smith berating Joseph Smith for his doubts. Anytime he has these bad characters, sometimes he has these bad characters, he calls them whores. And it's like, so you got Nehor and you have Korihor. And so it's like, and for a man who very shortly in life after the publication of the Book of Mormon will have these rumors swirling about him cheating on his wife with teenage girls.
A reflection of...
Yeah. And it's like, there's something going on, because he's very young when he publishes the Book of Mormon, and there's a, I mean, you can see that there's a lot of a young man's struggle with himself and his own ideas and doubts. And this is where it comes to the head for the story of the history of Joseph Smith that most people who've not been Mormon probably don't know.
Okay.
So Joseph Smith, when he was young, about 7 years old, his brother Hiram went away to school, or it was a school right down the road. He was going to a school called Moore's Charity School. It was connected to Dartmouth University, and he was studying basically to go into the seminaries, preparing to go into seminary. And at that time, the family's fortunes had all taken a turn south. This is around 1812, 1813. And their dad had lost all of his money. He had inherited a small sum of money. The Smiths are the same Smiths that came over on the Mayflower. So they're like a Massachusetts-based family, but they're in Vermont at that point. Vermont, making the switch from Vermont over to New York, where Joseph Smith ultimately grows up. And right at that time, his brother comes home with scarlet fever, and the whole family takes sick.
By the way, I had scarlet fever. I kid you not.
Did you really?
I
Oh,
kid you
really?
not. Yeah, I had to go into the hospital one time. I was sick. I had like a rash, like on my skin. I was young, and they did DNA tests, and they checked me, and they said, "You have scarlet fever." They said this is extremely rare these days. I guess it's like an older thing that used to be.
Oh yeah.
And this was when I was younger. Yeah, so that's weird.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah,
you and Joseph Smith got this connection, man.
Yeah, it's the polygamy, baby. It's the polygamy. Just saying.
Okay.
Even in a fire.
Okay. If anybody's gonna get called out for the polygamy, it's the guy who's actually got polygamists in the family. But no, he gets scarlet fever, and it gets so bad that at one point they actually have to perform an experimental operation at the time, where they have to they cut open his leg, and they break off some of his bone marrow. They have to drill into his leg bone and drill. And this is a well-known story, that part, in Mormonism, because the story goes that Joseph Smith, they go to give him whiskey before they do the surgery, and he refuses it. The secret that Mormonism's been keeping for a long time is Joseph Smith was a notorious drunk. He drank all the time. He drank until the day he died. The day he died, he and his boys got smashed on wine, right? And but the church started to position around that. No, we've never been drinkers. Totally a lie. Getting on towards the 20th century, they start telling the story that Joseph Smith had this revelation that we weren't supposed to drink alcohol anymore. And that's why even in his youth, when he had to have this surgery, he would say, if my father will just hold me, then I can bear the pain. And it's this virtuous story that his mother used to tell. And it's such a mom story. It's like, okay, whether or not it's true when he was a child and had the surgery, the problem is that Joseph Smith's father, who had this downturn in fortunes, he drowned his sorrows in booze.
Yeah.
And you find this out in the story, he had a serious alcohol problem. And so when you think about this little boy saying, no, I won't take any whiskey, my daddy just holds me, then it's like, okay, we get that you're embarrassed about your dad's drinking, but be sensitive about your father has a serious problem here. But he is a little boy. I mean, right. He acts like a little boy. And so, but it's around that time then that they have his little sister dies from the fever, and she's just a toddler. She's brand new. She's just a baby. And his mother is so devastated by the loss of this child. And then going down the years, they lose their eldest son, Alvin. He dies. And her story is so full of grief. And then at the same time, she's turning towards Methodism, trying to find some comfort. And a preacher comes to her and says, listen, you got to sort out the baptism of your children, the children that remain, because these children that you've lost, they're in hell waiting for you, wishing that you had gotten them baptized. Now you should baptize the children you have left before you are separated from them forever. Which, besides the fact that is perhaps the meanest, cruelest thing you
Yeah.
could say to a grieving mother. It's very clearly one of the main criticisms, skepticisms people at this time have with Christianity, both Catholic Christianity and the Reformation, is that they can't square this. What happens with children when they die? And you can say whatever you personally believe, but then square it biblically with what's written in the Gospels. When with Jesus being the living water, and no man cometh except by me. Baptism for the dead. What does that actually mean? Why are they then baptized for the dead? And Joseph Smith, in the process of this, this is all being absorbed in his brain, and watching his family get torn apart. Well, then his father gets caught up in it because he is a universalist. He's kind of a deist, basically. He believes in God, but he doesn't subscribe to any religious sect. And at that time, his wife starts to come after him about, you really need to consider getting baptized and being the example, so that your boys, your children who are still surviving, will see your example and be baptized. You need to be converted to the church. And when his father finds out about this, he's like, whoa, no, hold on. So grandpa comes by and he tells them, he comes by and he says, listen, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life. Your faith is your faith. But before you do it, I want to give you something that's going to be very important. And I'm just asking you to accept this as a gift from a loving father who wants you to think things through first. And he gives him Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. Yeah.
So that makes sense. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So at the time when Mormonism's coming about, you have in 1829, 1830, well, I really is 1828 to 1830, when they're actively working on it. That's when Joseph Smith has access to this document and all of the doubts that Thomas Paine, who believed in God, that's before somebody calls me out on that, he did believe in.
Yeah,
he's a deist. He's a classic deist. But the Age of Reason is perhaps one of the best takedowns of modern Christianity or historical Christianity that exists at that time, and maybe that exists ever. So
by the way, we got a super chat on my end over here, Joe, on my channel. Bakken Pan Danny Biss, thank you so much. He says, baptism for the dead, mystery school like Addis. If I may comment on this, because I think this is an interesting thing. When you ask many Christians, what Paul baptizing for the dead? What is this? They usually don't know. And I think that's why you have, the Mormonism actually comes to try and explain what this is. When you go back and you look at the primary sources, you won't find this in Jewish literature. Baptism of the dead is not a Jewish thing. So I found some sources from 5th century BCE in Greece, contemporary sources around the 1st century, around the time of Paul, all from pagan, I put in scare quotes, meaning non-Jewish sources. And they had one from an Orphic story. There's an Orphic myth, Orpheus / Dionysian stuff. There was often this kind of idea. And someone died in their sins, and the loved one, the family member, was able to baptize on behalf of that member who is dead, to get them to move into the Elysian fields, the blissful state of the afterlife. And so they were able to baptize for them so they could then go to that pleasant place. And when you hear Paul talk about baptism of the dead, you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? What is the baptism of the dead if it's not somehow on behalf of someone who died and likely wasn't in a state of salvation or belief or whatever, or baptized? They weren't baptized themselves. And it seems that was there for that reason. And I'll make one more comment about the Gospel of Peter. The Gospel of Peter is one of the early depictions of this like revelation of hell, right? in it, if you knew a Christian and you went to hell, that Christian can get you a get out of hell free card. In the Gospel of Peter, Christians can get their friends that they knew in life who weren't in heaven to go to heaven from hell. So that text, of course, lost favor in terms of its canonicity, but it was very important early document that was preached in churches. People believed it, all that kind of stuff. So just thought I'd mention that. One thing about this Korihor thing, though, and I don't want to throw you off from the path you were going with the story and the Age of Reason and all that, but I can't remember the name of the movie. It's more like a horror movie. You might know it off the top of your head because it's more in your area. There were two girls that show up to this house and they're trying to preach their LDS, Mormonism to this guy, and it's a horror movie. You know what I'm talking about? Heretic. Okay.
Yeah.
So two things I want to do. I want to just bring that up and show what the hell, because they make this ex-Mormon studied man into this evil, really bad skeptic. He even feigns a resurrection, and it's so freaky. I mean, that movie freaking freaked me the hell out. I can't stand the claustrophobia kind of experience that goes on with the horror and the torture and the shit that was going on in the house. But then I think of 28 years later, the last one.
Okay.
Did you watch that one?
I've not seen 28 Years Later. I have to admit. I know. I have to see that.
Okay. I'm not judging.
I love me a good zombie flick, man.
Yeah, you're gonna want to watch it. Totally opposite paint by the author. Like they drew a different portrait, because in Heretic, the skeptic he's a heretic. He's bad. Right. And in fact, you almost walk away feeling like the poor innocent Mormon girls who are clearly naive, and need to mature and grow up and realize the world isn't. But they were good all along, and their faith is what kept them strong, right? Like that's how I at least took it. When one escapes, the other one doesn't. Spoiler alert! I'm already ruining the movie. But then the other movie, which I don't want to spoil for you, is to say the opposite image gets portrayed. And it's very, very realistic. And I thought, this is a hell of a movie. It really makes you think. So I don't want to say any more until you actually watch the movie, I think.
Okay. I'll say a little bit more and trying not to spoil it. Well, I mean, as far as Heretic, yes. I have seen Heretic. I have to say this is one of the best movies for me, and very related to Korihor, in my opinion.
So help me if I'm wrong in my interpretation. I'm curious to get your thoughts, but go ahead.
I love it because there's so much symbolism that the filmmakers baked into Heretic that is very much about the criticism not only of Mormonism but also criticism of ex-Mormons like me, and that is that I don't think that Hugh Grant's character is strictly evil. Okay. In the story, he represents, like Korihor, he represents that faith cannot grow except in a field of doubt. That the whole concept of the virtue of faith comes from being able to look at your doubts and face them, and then decide, like you're saying, these sister missionaries, that they are going to believe in spite of the doubts, but living with them. And I'm like, well, I have to say, in that regard, it's a virtue to say, here's this guy who he's doing this basically as a service to kind of, in a sick, disgusting way, to say, are you worthy? Are you worthy of going to meet God in the ultimate way? And this is where I'll leave without spoiling the end. If you watch the movie, you think of the last thing you see in the movie. Mm-hmm. And then remember this. There's a moment when they come into the house, which, by the way, well, yeah, I'll talk about that in a second here. When they come into the house, which they're not supposed to do unless there's a woman present, because they're sister missionaries, which is true about missionaries having been one. And that has to do with Ted Bundy. So if you want to hear about that, we can talk about it. But they come into the house, and he tells them, I do have to warn you, your cell phones aren't going to work in here because there's metal there's circuitry, there's metal in the ceiling, and there's no signal. And when they decide, well, yeah, I mean, they're going to get a convert one way or another. Okay, we don't have to make a phone call. You think about now. You think about all the symbolism. All of this is symbolic. The candle that smells like a blueberry pie.
That's
That's about the Book of Mormon, which is a blue covered book, and it's like, but it's a fake. It smells like
good, but it's not. Yeah,
but it's not the real thing. It's got kind of the hook in there. But the money in the walls. He says there's money in the walls and there's money in the ceiling. Or no, he says there's metal in the ceiling and the ceiling's always leaking. And it's always leaking, always leaking, always leaking, always leaking. That is, if you ask me, the metal in the ceiling is money. And he's talking about the church. The church's lies, the church's anachronisms, the church is constantly having to plug the holes in their doctrine keeps coming through because the church has become this monstrosity focused on money. And the Mormon Church, if you don't know, is pretty much the most cash-rich and asset-rich organization in the world. Like there are newspaper articles about how they have an exit trajectory because of their money. They have so much money that it doesn't even mean anything anymore. But basically, if they need any amount of money, they can just have it, and they can create any kind of economy for themselves that they want. And that's how they become one of the most powerful organizations in the world. Damn. So while they have to plug all these holes in their doctrine, it's kind of like, we really don't, though, because you could let this whole thing fall down. As long as we've got our money, who cares?
I'll tell you the one part where he gets the girls finally into the next stage outside of the living room, into the room with the game shows pop up, and he's talking about iterations of new religions like game shows, and then he has a song, Creep, comes up, which is perfect. He's right about the concept of the recycling of the religions and like reusing older stuff. Where it really annoyed me is that if he would have just done any actual deep comparative religion stuff, instead of taking Zeitgeist and applying Zeitgeist, Horus, December 25th, the 12 disciples, the whole 9, like identical, as if Jesus is just a carbon copy of the identical other religions. If he would have just been a little bit more scholarly about how that part of the video was, it would have really just been like, oh, this is so good to me, because it's it's the pop level meme version of Jesus is just a carbon copy of all the other religions, instead of a much more sophisticated, nuanced understanding of how there's a recycling of these traditions. And of course, Christianity picks up on this stuff. So that was my only concern about it overall.
I think it's valid. And at the same time, I kind of see it that way and look at it. I look at the story of Myth Vision, if I may. Yeah. I look at my story and my deconstruction from Mormonism and that of a lot of ex-Mormons, and I'm sure you've seen the same with ex-evangelicals. You've seen the same, is that here you and I, we have deep respect for mythology and for myth and why it's valuable. But there was a time where in my snarky, angry new atheist phase, where it was just like Hugh Grant in Heretic, it was burn this down, man. Burn it all down. This is just all fake, poking holes at it.
Yeah.
He represents that angry phase in a way. And also and that makes him a villain in the story. The filmmakers make him out to be a villain because all he wants to do is ruin other people's faith, which is like Gedona in the story of Korihor. He's like, okay, even if what you're saying is right, shut up, man, because all these people's hope is built on it.
Yeah.
And Korihor's like, yeah, okay, fine. But it's a lie, and it's a lie that you use to exploit people.
Right. That's his problem, is the exploiting, I think, overall. And you might even can make the case that in the movie, that's what the point of the guy, he's not into the fact that they're at his house. They're doing missionary work. They're going out trying to make it's funny how hypocritical that shit goes. Because, come on, man. That's a lot of people's hopes, bro. Why are you calling us out? Hey, go knock on the next door. Let's get them to believe too. Shh. Why are you talking? Shh. And go to the next door and make them like your whole mission is to change everyone else to be like you, but we're not allowed to buck back and be critical and say, hey, I have hope that more people won't be duped by your bullshit or won't fall prey to the naivety that they, believe what you're selling them, and then their whole lives get trapped into some cult-like situation. Because I could see regular Mormonism becoming a gateway to FLDS or some other form of extreme version of this cult. Even if you want to say like common everyday Mormons aren't as extreme, there are forms of Mormonism that are, and maybe it just depends on where you're at and how that works with mainstream Mormonism. But I've watched a few of those documentaries with FLDS members and thought, holy bro, this is insane. This is insane. So
anyway. We have a mission here that serves the people from the FLDS community right now. So I've been going back and forth between the East Coast and Virginia, where I have one base out there, and then here in St. George, Utah. And just down the road from here in St. George, Utah is Colorado City, Short Creek, which is where the FLDS were and are. And when Warren Jeffs went to prison, this whole community, all their assets got divvied up by the state, and and this was a wealthy, powerful organization, which actually has a lot to do with aerospace, if you can believe it. But I don't have time to get into that yet. But basically, they had a lot of money, and these women and these families that are left in Colorado City, they were left with like none of it, and the men just took off and abandoned them. Yeah. And so there's this organization out there basically founded by former polygamist women called Cherish Families. And the Church of Korihor, we have partnered with them to raise donations of blankets, food, toys for kids, and even just we collect money donations through the Church of Korihor, which is an actual church registered with the state of Utah and the IRS as a church. And we take these donations and we give it directly to them, and we take it down to support them. Wow. Because at the end of the day, I use Korihor as an example because we're named after him. But this is always what I felt like a church for atheists. If we had the equivalent of a church, we would do it right. And that's why Korihor is a good example for me, is that he calls out the church and gets his voice taken away. Alma tells him when he's like under duress, he's like, wait a minute, I'm sorry, a devil deceived me. So just like give me back the use of my voice. And Alma tells him no, because you would go and lead away these people again. So he casts it off on God and says, but if God decides to do it, then let him do it. I think there's a lot of Paul in that story, but we can leave that. But then it says that Korihor has to go for the rest of his days, go house to house begging for his food. It says it twice. Joseph Smith felt very important to mention. And he went house to house begging for his food. And it's like this shameful thing. Right. And I'm like sitting here like, okay, so it's basically like reverse Good Samaritan is what's happening here. Because then he ends up not being able to rely on the Christianity of his Christian neighbors. He ends up on the highway going down the road to the Zoramites, and he's found trampled to death there. Right. And this is celebrated in the Book of Mormon. The chief judge writes to all the people from the surrounding towns and says, now we see what happens with people who fell for Korihor and his lies. And then, and even the Book of Mormon writes to us, whoever the author of Alma 30 or Alma 16, depending on which version of the Book of Mormon you're using, writes to us and says at the end, the last line of the story goes, and so we see that the devil will not support his children in the last days. And it's like, go a little less hard, Joseph Smith, number one. Number two, it is in itself, if you compare it to the Good Samaritan story, it is ironically, I don't think Joseph Smith meant this to happen, but it is ironic that he shows that the Good Samaritan Christianity that Jesus supposedly teaches in the modern Christianity is exactly the opposite. That in this material focused, prosperity gospel driven Christianity we see nowadays, you see that they are more interested, that they are the Levite or the priest who passes the man on the street and leaves him by and lets him die.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think Joseph Smith meant for that to be the case. I think that was an archetype that just kind of manifests in his story. And like I said, because I think he got hungry and it was lunchtime and he was like, let's wrap this shit up and get out of here. And so and it just assembled in this way that shows that this, as it derails, as the story of Korihor derails at the end, he accidentally exposes not only everything that's wrong with Christianity, he exposes particularly the future, ironically, a prophetic vision of the future of what Mormonism becomes. And because these people have, Derek, they have enough money, they could end world hunger. They could do it today. You tell it to a Mormon, they will deny it. They have over $300 billion in assets. They are the single entity that owns more farmland than any in America than any other institution, and they are now buying up all the farmland they can in Australia, because in Australia they're actually benefiting from the Trump era tariffs, because these Australians, their government is coming in and helping the local economy to profit from new trade deals throughout the rest of the world, where trade deals are starting to collapse as these tariffs have come up with the U.S. And it's like the church is like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people believe in the MAGA movement. I'm trying to make a political commentary there, but the church saw this and said, well, we're not going to let it hurt our business, which is most of the farm business in America, frankly. If it's not food produced by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it's produced on land that they lease to farmers. And so when they see this, the weekend that the tariffs first went into effect in 2025, the news came out that they had purchased all of this farmland in Australia. They may by now be the primary owners of farmland in Australia now. And It's like they are that focused, that materialistic, and they could be solving world hunger. They just don't want to.
Here's the issue though, right? Because in the New Testament, you have this like conflicting different voices. You clearly have Jesus teaching stuff like sell all that you own to the rich man and come follow me, right? Clearly there's this idea that he really wants them to not think materialistically. Now, why? Critical scholars who read Jesus typically understand him within an apocalyptic framework. So the reason it doesn't matter if you get rid of everything is that it's all going to go to shit in a handbasket or whatever, hell in a handbasket in no time anyway. So get rid of your attachments to this earth, because I'm going to give a new heaven, a new earth, and there's going to be a renewal of things. An apocalypse is going to happen. The end is going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. When you get to the book of Acts, though, Acts chapter 5, 1 through 11, you have this like commune that has like everything in common. Everyone owns everything in common. And some of these people who have more money and land go and sell their land. And the people who are lead examples of this in this story, like you have with Korihor's story, you have Ananias and Sapphira. Mm-hmm. And Ananias approaches, and sure enough, hey, is this everything? And he's like, yeah. No, boom, the Holy Spirit strikes them dead. Right then he dies. Then the wife comes in and they start to ask her, like, before you lie, you're going to lie to the Holy Spirit. Boom, wife struck dead. They drag both their bodies out. And it's like this cruel, oh my gosh, they lied to the Holy Spirit. We don't have empathy for that. The Christians don't even give a shit. Like in their own story, they're like, no, drag those bodies out, get rid of them. They lied to the Holy Spirit about money. So notice money again. Give the money to the group. Give the money to who's going to be handling this money if it isn't the elders, if it isn't the presbyters, if it isn't the leadership in the cult. And it's kind of odd when you go and read like Paul's letters, which I think Acts is building upon, even though he contradicts it so many times. That's a whole different show we don't have time to get into. Paul is concerned about getting money from all these different people in all these different locations and bringing it back for the poor in Jerusalem. In Acts, they don't even mention the episode, but in Paul's letters, it's extremely important that he gets this money. And he even goes out of his way in 1 Corinthians to talk about in 1 Corinthians 7 or 9, one of those two chapters. It's an odd number chapter where he's like going, they can marry and you guys can provide them with food and you guys can provide them with money and they can marry, they're allowed to, but I'm not allowed to. So he's like, he's struggling with these people in Corinth, according to this letter. And he's like, I deserve money too, but I don't want your money, he says. But then he keeps complaining about it. But like, I'm not asking for your money. But then he's like, clearly he wants them to provide for him somehow. Like he does want their money somehow. So even I know that we're dealing with a different era with way more money in the Mormon church. You can imagine that many of the politically powered Christians eventually took a lot of these stories and thought of them in ways that weren't like that. Because when you get to Athanasius I think Origen mentions this, but for sure Athanasius and others, they read Jesus when he talks about sell everything you own and come follow me, the opposite. They literally say, I know you're reading this and you think Jesus is saying this. He means the opposite. So they've reinterpreted Jesus and literally made his message the opposite of what Jesus actually taught. Just go read the Fathers. Anyway, I've rambled on.
And speaking of the patristic criticisms of that time, you have Jerome, I think it is, or the pseudo Clementines go hard against the Ebionites, if I'm not mistaken. The Ebionites, Ebion comes from the Hebrew word, the Aramaic word is Ebion, right? Which is supposedly what is used in the Sermon on the Mount to refer to those who are poor. What are the poor? They will inherit the kingdom of God. And so, but when you talk about them, as you know, they're supposedly talking about the Ebionites are the cult of Peter, the cult of Cephas. They are the Christians, the Jewish Christians in Jerusalem, who believe, if you look into the history of them, that you should go without purser-script, that you should be vegetarian, that you should kill not even animals. That they believe that Jesus taught them the Last Supper was a vegetarian supper. He taught them to be vegetarian, and that you should not keep holy days. You shouldn't keep any days. Don't keep track of days. And don't gather wealth at all. And like you said, because it was eschatological, it was an end times cult, really. I mean, they're waiting for the end of the world, and very plausibly, how do you live through 70 CE? How do you live through the Roman occupation and the sacking of the temple as a Jewish Christian, and then go on with this survivor's guilt of Jesus was going to come back? We were supposed to, and Christianity really fractures with that. It's like, was it ever about a man? Was it about a man who was supposed to come back? Was this resurrection supposed to be the second coming, or is the second coming separate? Are we waiting on the second coming? When is it? And this, boom, you got you got Christianity. You got 2,000 years of that, and we're still doing it 2,000 years later. So I find it fascinating. But here's the thing, though. It's like, I look at it now as an adult who's been an atheist now. I've been an atheist for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did the angry phase for like 2 decades, frankly. Solid. Everything that is church related is just bullshit. People who own and run churches are evil. And now I have started a church. I have a clergy that I've created. We have a book of scripture at korihor.org, in which part of the scripture is this chapter from the Book of Mormon, which is now in public domain. Thanks, Joseph Smith, about the story of Korihor. But then right after that, it goes into Thomas Paine, The Age of Reason. I call it in 3 parts. I call it first reason, second reason, third reason. And it's the Thomas Paine is, if there is atheist scripture for me, it is Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason, and then the lectures of Robert G. Ingersoll. One lecture by Bertrand Russell, and then we're going to be expanding with some other writings here coming up soon too. But if you haven't read Robert G. Ingersoll, it's amazing. The skeptics, not even Robert G. Ingersoll, he was called the Great Agnostic because he claimed not to know whether or not there was a God, which is ironically the story of every atheist I know these days. We take atheists. I take atheist, but if you find me an atheist that's not an agnostic atheist, it's the same thing. Atheist for me, atheist is a label. We're really just mainly skeptics about religion, who can look at it and say, I get it. It's like, it's not like I don't get it. It's you were a pastor, you preach the gospel. It's not like you can't get it, why people get value from this in our lives.
Right.
We've preached it. We know it. It's that we're looking at, I look at it and say, as an atheist, I see all the skepticism, all the reason to be skeptical, and say we could do better without being tied to the Bible.
Right.
And the irony is that's kind of Joseph Smith's story too, because even in the Book of Mormon, it says a Bible, in the last days they will say, a Bible, we have a Bible, and there can be no more Bible, which is exactly what you would expect. A 20-year-old farm boy who's sick and tired of people telling his mom that she's not going to see her kids in heaven because they didn't have the right religion. That's exactly how that kid would speak. And I look at it and say, okay, well, the Book of Mormon is bullshit. It's bullshit that tells a true story about why people were fed up with Christianity and why Christianity needed to become better. And in that regard, the Book of Mormon actually becomes very instructive. It's like a textbook in why we should look at this and reconsider everything that we once believed and say, why did we? Right?
Yeah. With 4 minutes left, I'd have so many more questions. We should do this again, actually.
I would love that.
Yeah, because I want to ask you about how polygamy. I know it pulls up into other doctrines that he teaches, but I don't think they appear in the Book of Mormon, which allows Mormons to dichotomize, and allow these other teachings that Joseph Smith gets revelations about, and allows some of the kooky stuff that goes on later with the wives and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think personally, I just think it's interesting the way you just said that about the fact that you have to have new revelation, you have to have new scriptures to fix something that's just not working. It's not. The old is just not working. So either you're going to come up with new scriptures or you're going to reinterpret the old ones. But how long is that sustainable, that words don't mean words? And how successful can you make that kind of interpretation for everyone who's reading a word to go, yeah, but the word really means this? Like, no. Read it through my interpretive lens. And it's like, we're moving on, right? We're growing up out of these things as a species, I think. And these are older models. We need the new iPhone 10, the new iPhone 11, the new iPhone 12, like the religion needs to upgrade,
And ironically, right now, that's actually happening in Mormonism. So when we talk about this again, we can talk about Chad and Lori Daybell and how they're the offshoots. If you follow that story, the offshoot of the Lori Daybell cult is alive and well and currently trying to take over Mormonism again. But again, we don't have time. We don't have time for that. But like you said, we only have a couple minutes left. I was hoping, because that you would indulge me, Derek.
Sure.
Thank you again. You are my friend. I am very grateful that you would have us on and share this time with us. One of the things that we're known for in the Church of Korihor, it's a spiritual community for godless people, is our godless hymns, mostly because of the snarky ones. But in service to Korihor, I was hoping you'd let me play for you our anthem, the first of the hymns that I wrote about Korihor, to share with you and all of our friends at Myth Vision.
Let's do it.
I want to thank my friend Derek. Everybody's Derek Lambert, Myth Vision. People at Hellfire Agency, if you're not following, please follow Myth Vision.
And vice versa.
Awesome. So let's play O Korihor. Let's see here. Is this our guy? This is our guy. All right. And to all my friends over at the Church of Korihor, remember to flash bright.
Oh, Korihor, you dare to free by Alma's hand, unholy sorcery. They stole your voice for Nephite tyranny. From hypocrisy, stop to be free. He died for me. Ignite my mind. Dogma consume. Oh, Korihor, I'll speak for you. Contrary to law, they bound you for thinking, but without a word, they all debates forfeit. Battle of wits, charlatans unarmed, beguile their sheep with holy bullshit. Ignite my mind, from hypocrisy. Start to be free. Die for me. He died. Ignite my mind. Dogma consume. Korihor, I'll speak for you. To honor their God, they showed you no mercy, turned you away, Mammon's altar to feed. Oh, wicked duress, they broke your solemn mind, crucified you with bread to fuel their heartless greed. Ignite my mind from hypocrisy. Start to be free. He died for me. Ignite my mind. Dogma consume. Oh, Korihor, I'll speak for you.
Thank you so much, Derek.
Dude, that's badass.
Thank
Holy
you.
bullshit. You know what I mean?
Amen.
No,
Amen. Preach it.
I really appreciate you. And again, I think that's a really interesting, the way you framed it, to point out a salvation character within a book that, may not have intended that, but as you can see, became something of its own. And I think that's really, really cool on what you're doing with Korihor. So for those who don't know, Joe, go subscribe to his YouTube channel. Joe has got a church that is obviously just creating community in a skeptical think tank, so to speak, and also wants to do real charitable deeds, real things. And, I would say real good religion that's helping people who are in need, things like that, that we should all want, no matter what you believe or don't believe, we should all want. But when you have, like you point out, Mammon and all this stuff in this, there's a lot of bad that goes on in a lot of these organizations. So appreciate you having me, man.
Thank you very much. Flash bright, Derek.
Thank you.